Hey guys, it's Margaret from Days Well Spent, and today I'm going to show you how to propagate rosemary. I'm going to show you using new growth, which is the quickest and easiest way to propagate rosemary. Okay, so I went ahead and clipped back a little bit further than we normally do, and as you can see, this is dry, and if you bend it and break it, you'd actually hear kind of a snapping sound like you would with a twig or something. If we look up here, you can see this nice bright green. This is all new growth. And what we want is to use this new growth because it's softer wood and it's going to allow roots to form easier. Springtime is the best time to get this new growth because as you can see here, our plant is covered with this bright green. And right now, I'm not sure when you're going to be watching this video, right now it is the week after Mother's Day, so early May. And our plant is just covered, like I said, with new growth. Here, this stem has 5 sections of new growth. New growth starts right about here. So I'm going to snip just a little bit below that. Now this is going to be one of my first cuttings. Get a couple more here to show you. And the new growth is probably about 6 to 8 inches. So I'm going to come down about 9 to 10 inches and snip. I'm just using my garden shears. You can use some sharp scissors. The new growth is actually quite easy to snip. So then this will be our next cutting. And what you'll do is you'll go ahead, and I don't like to take more than about 10 cuttings from this bush here, and this bush is probably about 7 feet wide and about 3 feet tall. Always want to make sure that you leave plenty of new growth for the plant for the year. We never take more than about 8 to 10 clippings per season from each of our plants. And like I said, this plant is fairly old and pretty large. This is how we get the clippings for the rooted plants that we sell at local farmers markets. All of our plants are 100% organic. And I'm just cutting straight across. I'm not going at an angle or anything. You don't need to, because this isn't where the roots are going to form. What I'm going to do is go ahead and get the rest of my clippings, and then I'll show you the next step. So what you're going to need in order to propagate your rosemary is you're going to need some small pots. I like to work in 4-inch pots with some soil that is just lightly moist. So I'm going to go ahead, this one doesn't have any water in it yet, and add a little bit of rainwater. You can use distilled water. And what I like to do is just take my finger, poke a hole, that's where the little clipping is going to go. And I like to use root stimulator. It is optional, but you will notice a better root system and a quicker root system on your plants if you'll use it. Here's one of our clippings. This is, you can see some old growth. Up through here is the new growth. This new growth here, I'm going to peel it back. And we want to peel back several inches. And you can save that and use it. It's good rosemary, you don't have to waste it. If it's really dry, you can take it and just kind of scrape off some of that bark. But each of those places where we just pulled off some new growth, this is going to give us a root area. I take my stem, I like to get it wet. Then I'm going to take the root stimulator. I'm just going to poke it straight down in there and bring it up. As you can see, I got a couple of inches on there. I'm going to put it down into the hole and bring the soil up to it. Okay, again, we have this one. I'm just going to pull off these lower stems. Set those to the side. The container of the root stimulator doesn't say it has to be watered, but I was having some problems with not all of my clippings rooting a couple of years ago, and I talked to a local master gardener who specializes in herbs, and he suggested that I wet the stem before using the root stimulator, and that pretty much did the trick. I'm going to tap off. If you get too much on there, just tap off the excess. Okay, and I wanted to show you on a single stem a little bit closer. I always have a little bit of older growth. This isn't hard by any means, like the lower sections of the plant would be. I like to leave a little bit of this so that I can have more in the soil. Then we pinch off like we did before, and this much is the new growth. This is where the roots are going to grow, but we may get some further down here also. It just takes longer for this, when it's a brown area, to form those roots. Put in the water, the root stimulator, and in it goes. At this point, it really depends on your setup. Some people suggest putting a bag over this or some type of dome in order to ensure that it stays really moist. I've not had an issue with my pots drying out, so I don't do that. You do want to keep the soil moist, but don't let it get so wet that it becomes soggy, or when you lift it up, you've got water dripping off of it. Propagating rosemary is not nearly as quick as propagating basil. If you've watched our basil video, you know that in just a few days, about a week, you've got roots that you can see. Rosemary is much slower. You're going to be waiting a couple of months. You don't want to pull it out and check it, because that's when you're going to break off those really delicate roots. Just leave it alone. As long as it's staying green and you start to notice a little bit of growth after a couple of months, you're fine. If the stem starts to brown, check your soil. Rosemary is from the Mediterranean. It doesn't like to have super wet roots or stems. So if you're noticing that it's browning, that's almost always because you've overwatered it. So you want this to be a little bit moist, but definitely not wet. Let me show you this pot here, and this one is doing great. You can see my soil is super dry. I only water our rosemary plants every couple of weeks. I definitely, when they're starting out like this. Now when they're out in the garden, I don't water them any extra, except when we hit like July and August and we can go, a couple of months without rain. So I got everything potted up. I ended up with 12 pots. Just a quick recap. We clipped the new growth, which is this bright green, from our plant. Made sure not to over clip. Again, I've only got 12 clippings from that large bush. We planted them in some good organic seed starting mix. We used the fast rooting hormone on the stem section, and in a couple of months we'll start seeing roots form, and within about 4 to 6 months we'll have a really good root system, and these will be ready to transplant up. Again, you want to watch for the soil. You want to make sure that it stays moist but not wet. If you start seeing any type of browning, you want to back off on your watering and make sure that it's not in too direct of sunlight. We're going to keep these out in the greenhouse, so the lighting will be very indirect. If you notice your soil is drying out too quickly, you can put a bag over top of these. Just make sure that it doesn't touch the stem. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments section and I'll be happy to answer them. And I'll come back and do a follow-up video for you guys in about a month or so, and we can take a look at these. Follow us on Instagram. I'll be sure in a week or two to post some pictures of how these are doing for you. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments section and I'll be happy to answer them.